go.
Where should I be looking? There? Don't look at this camera.
You can look at whichever one you want to.
I'll be looking over here. We want to look at each other? How do you want this set up?
If our legs were intertwined.
You're a little tight.
Okay. Welcome to the first Hostile Opinions.
Ooh. Yes. Did you think about this name?
I've already had the name. I just haven't used it for anything.
I didn't know we were getting hostile here.
Well, it could be hostile. It just opens it up if you say like, oh, the happy opinions, and everyone's expecting something good, but we can say hostile opinions and they're expecting the worst. But if we come up with something good, then it's like a bonus. So,
how deep are you in your fighting training?
Not very deep. Not very deep.
Just it could get intense in this room.
We have something breaks there. Off the wall. I'm joined today by Stacey Bauman, and Stacey is a foreigner, imported from Canada. He's an alien.
Yeah.
And background in professional hockey player. He went to Harvard University.
Such a terrible school. Get that right.
Did I go to Harvard?
No. You knew that.
Where'd you go to school?
Yale.
Yale. Oklahoma State, full of, you had to take second back.
Yeah.
Yale, like Y-E-L-L.
Mm-hmm. Yale.
Moved to Oklahoma because he didn't have any other options. And today, we are going to discuss alcohol. Now, we talked about it a little bit from there's a secular standpoint as far as should we drink or what are the benefits of drinking alcohol. I read a book actually by Annie Grace called The Alcohol Habit. That's what it was called. But it was about the negative side of alcohol and then the advertising side of how they've spent billions of dollars integrating alcohol into society. Anyway, so the discussion starts with, is alcohol, everybody drinks alcohol, or we have a culture that loves alcohol. Everyone in the world drinks alcohol all the time. It's been going on for thousands of years. There's obviously a lot of negative benefits to it. But we're going to discuss what are the positive benefits of alcohol, and should we drink from a moral standpoint. We're going to be coming from the perspective of Christianity as a basis. We're both Christians, so in order to have a morality, you have to have a basis for it, and that's what we're basing on. So if you're a Christian, should you drink alcohol? And I think we should. So.
Okay. Are we ending there? Is it done? Are we actually going to discuss it?
Join us next week for Should We Smoke Weed?
I love it.
So, Stacey, give me what do you think? Like, give me an opening statement, like, on your thoughts on, from a Christian standpoint, or moral standpoint. It's Christianity is where we're basing our argument from, but there's many other religions that also have a basis for not drinking. And just from a morality standpoint, what would be your thoughts on it, or based on the Bible?
Yeah, sure. Well, I'm going to approach it from that standpoint and from my faith, because that drives how I view everything in the world. And so I'm not just a morality. Well, I think I get morality from my faith. So
it's not innate.
Not innate. That's probably a question for another time.
Yeah.
Possibly. Anyway, I don't think it is. I think it's anyways, on this topic.
You don't think you naturally have morality?
Well, God-given, by what I believe about God creating me. I probably have an inner morality. Anyway, that's a whole other topic. Right. I didn't prep for that one. Or this one. So, so I probably sit on the opposite side of you, where I would be very close to we probably shouldn't drink, but I'm not in we can't drink or we shouldn't, but I think the question I always ask, and I've posed to you before, is why do we? And so I think as a believer, as a Christian, if thinking about this topic, I do think we need to be very intentional about why, and know where we sit, because our culture does push alcohol, because our culture is, whatever book you read that talked about the advertising piece that does push alcohol and wants everybody to drink alcohol. it's very easy to just slip into I should or I do and not have thought about it a ton. And so I would sit on the side that why do we? And I feel like there are very few really good reasons why we should, if any. And so I'm not on the religious side that says you can't drink, it's a sin. I think the Bible is clear that isn't what it's saying, but I do sit on the side that's like, man, we really need to think about why we're doing this if we're doing it. So that's where I sit.
So one of my basic, both of us come from conservative background, and so we know a lot of people that would or have demonized it. It's like this is evil only. But one of the basis is why. One of my first arguments would be in John 2 when Jesus' first miracle where he turns the water into wine.
Yep.
And Jesus, if you don't know the story, Jesus shows up at a party with his mom. A wedding party because they ran out of wine. They'd been partying for 3 days and they were all worried because they drank all the wine. And they told the mom, Mary, that, and she's like, "Hey, Jesus, do something about this." And so the first recorded miracle of Jesus in the Bible is turning water into wine. And he turned when the guy tasted the wine, he said, "This is the best wine." Typically people use their best wine first and save the worst wine for last. So that way, when everyone's been drinking for 3 days, they don't notice that the wine is, a $7 bottle instead of the $20 bottle. So my question would be, like, I think anything in the other argument would be anything in excess, whether it's alcohol or sugar or even loving somebody, can be a negative thing. Anything in excess, the Bible makes that clear that is a sin. But it's in this specific instance, Jesus is turning water into wine for people who have been drinking, and they're drinking a lot. Mm-hmm. And he's turning like gallons, like 6 jars, and they assumed it was like 50 to 80 gallons or 30 to 80 gallons. It was a lot of alcohol. So other people have argued about like wine in the Bible, like, oh, well, it was medicinal and it was not highly alcoholic. But I think that you'd have to avoid this story I don't think this story. I think this story you'd have to overlook this story because it is like it's a party with wine, and they make the statement like typically do the good wine first, and the reason that you do that is because people can't tell the difference after they've been drinking if it's good or bad.
Sure.
So the question would be why would Jesus choose this to be his first miracle where it actually looks like he's like buying shots at a party almost like, and that doesn't seem. It doesn't go with number one. It doesn't go with a lot of verses in the Bible because the Bible, there's a lot of verses about drunkenness and there's a lot of verses about the evils of alcohol. Mm-hmm. And so, if you believe that the Bible, everything was written for a specific purpose, then why was this in there, and why is it the first miracle? Also, like I think it's John who says that, or Paul who says like. The miracles of Jesus could fill, like they're not all in the Bible. Like he performed.
We'd run out of books.
We'd run out of books, something like that. So he was doing, there's all kinds of miracles that weren't reported. Why was this one reported and why was it the first one?
Yeah.
But I guess, do you think that, would you agree on this hypnosis that he is, number one, that it's alcoholic wine that people are drinking more than likely to excess in celebration?
Yeah.
And he is condoning it somehow. I mean, I guess you could say, well, he's not, it's their choice to get drunk. If that's what they're doing. He wouldn't be happy with that choice, but he's definitely providing. Yeah. I mean, it's
sure.
If you buy some 15-year-olds some alcohol, you could say, well, they shouldn't drink it, but it does seem like he's enabling.
Yeah.
And then it's also just weird that the story's in the Bible and that why is it the first miracle that they record in the Bible? Like, why is this his first miracle?
Yeah. Yeah. I think all good questions on that piece, right? Like, so So some of the other context is it doesn't seem like Jesus is going to do anything potentially, and yet his mom sort of pushes him to this in this story, right? Where she says, hey, just do whatever he's going to do. Right. And he's, why are you involving me, mother? This is woman. Why, like, I'm not supposed to be. So, that opens a whole nother can of like the sovereignty of Christ, and what does he actually do something here that he didn't want to do and wasn't in his plan, or was it all in his plan, but it wasn't his timing? That's a whole nother question.
Be a huge boo-boo to launch his career on.
Right. Fair. I hear your argument that, it seems like they're partying for days. This is certainly a question that I'll have for Jesus when I see him one day, is like, it does seem like it opens a door. I don't think it's our blanket, like, well, then we can all just go get hammered at every wedding we go to. I don't think we can take this as our basis for, given what the rest of the Bible says, well, Jesus produced wine in this one situation, so therefore we can all get hammered whenever we want. I think that would be a misuse of it. It is confusing why he does this in this case. I read some stuff on this story about, and sometimes I think some people try to draw too much out of a story. So in the analysis of the story that I read, they talked about how shameful this would be for the groom and the bride to have, they're supposed to provide this party for multiple days, maybe even a week, and to run out of wine would be incredibly shameful. And Jesus shows up in the middle of their shame and provides for their need and removes the shame. It still doesn't change the fact that people are partying and drinking. He does that in abundance. So, he doesn't just provide a little bit of wine or the worst wine. He provides the best wine and an abundance of wine. Still doesn't answer the question that you're asking. But I like those analogies where Jesus shows up in their situation where it's supposed to be a celebratory thing and they've run out, and he meets the need, of what was expected to be provided by a groom and a bride. I love that he does it in the ceremonial washing jars, that he's like essentially slapping religion in the face. And
he's a rascal.
I like his attacks on religion that way. So there's some really neat pieces about this, but I agree it doesn't explain what you're asking, that it would seem that he is providing a substance that will perpetuate their drunkenness in that. And you've talked before about how this is a celebratory thing and alcohol can be used to celebrate. Does that then allow us to trend into drunkenness? What is the line of drunkenness, given everything else that the Bible does say negatively about drunkenness? Right. It's a great question.
Well, and then, so I think we both agree that it's alcohol in and of itself it's not inherently evil. And that is a stance that many people take, that like, no, there's never a time to do this, but it makes very clear, you have to overlook a lot of different verses that it's evil. So I guess a controversial question is it okay to get drunk as a Christian? Like, cause that would be what it appears this story. And I will say that there's not a lot of, if any, I don't know of any other stories in the Bible. Most of the verses that refer to like alcohol in a positive manner, they talk about celebration, but it's not about an excess. Like the drunkard is always a negative term, and like I looked up the Hebrew word manusa, but it basically means addict. That's like the same word as that. So typically the negative connotations are an addict when it talks about alcohol, and the Proverbs talks about it a lot. But there's not any other verses, but this one's super important mainly because it's Jesus. And so it's not an apostle, and Apostle Paul has quite a bit to say on drinking and when it's okay and when it's not, but they don't really get into, other than saying being a drunkard is bad, and it's typically used in the form as being a drunkard. Is there a level of intoxication, or couldn't you get intoxicated under the right circumstances? And I would base on that would be on this story. It seems like Jesus is like, okay, this is a safe place. You guys are celebrating, so it's okay here, because obviously he never sinned, so it can't it couldn't have been a sin for him to do that. Like one of those guys went home and just beat his wife that night.
Sure.
Jesus is not responsible for that. So, but why? The question: why does he doing that. And then another, like, it seems like this is one of the only, I can't think of any other instances in the Bible that would like give to excess, where it seems like he's promoting excess. I had a couple of verses that I wrote down, like Ecclesiastes 9:7 says, "Go eat your bread with joy, drink your wine with merry heart, for God has already approved what you do." Psalms 104, "You cause the grass to grow to livestock and plants for to cultivate. He may bring forth food from the earth and wine to gladden the heart of man, oil to make his face shine, and bread to strengthen a man's heart." So most of the other times alcohol is referred to, it's either referred to as a drunkard and really bad, or it's like slightly mentioned in things about God blessing vineyards, people celebrating with wine, and like that one says a merry heart. So you could argue like, wow, they're talking, you're going to drink enough to have a merry heart. Leviticus, and I also noticed like a lot of the negative connotations when it mentions it is like, 1 Timothy 3:8 says, "Deacons likewise, you must be dignified, not double-tongued, and not addicted to much wine, not greedy for dishonest gain." It's like, it's okay, but don't be greedy for it, or don't be addicted to it.
Yeah.
Leviticus, Moses telling Aaron and the Levites, maybe that's not what he's talking to, but he says, don't have any strong drink before going into the temple, which would lead me to believe and strong drink would be like liquor, that he actually says wine or strong drink before going into the temple. Strong drink would be something that you would drink for the purpose of intoxication.
Right.
And so he's telling them, hey, before you go to church,
don't get hammered.
Don't get hammered before you go to church.
Sure.
Which would lead me to believe like that there's a time or a place that it's okay for the priest. He's talking to the priest, like, you can drink your strong liquor outside of it, but you cannot do it on Sunday mornings.
Yeah.
Otherwise, and I might be dissecting too much, but I think it's a valid case. Like, why would he specify not to drink strong liquor before going to church?
Sure.
Why wouldn't he say never drink strong liquor?
Yeah.
At church or at home. And there's, in Judges talks a lot about that with like Samson and what was he? What type of vow did he make?
Nazarite.
The Nazarite vow. Like there's people who make vows never to drink alcohol because you can assume that they're to avoid the negative effects, I guess. I don't guess. I'm assuming.
Right.
Maybe just low calories, like a workout plan. NFL players in training camp don't drink alcohol either. So
only.
Maybe that's what it is. It's like, listen, we're going to need you to be in super good shape. So no alcohol.
Well, it would seem that vow is like him set apart for God, right? Like there's that'd be an interesting extrapolation out of that is, okay, so those who are set apart for God's work are not to touch this stuff, right? That's an interesting piece. And this would be a stretch, but are we not all set apart? Are we all not masterpieces created for a purpose, Ephesians 2:10, to do the work that God has prepared in advance for each of us to do? And if we're all set apart for that mission and that purpose to live in what God's created us for, and some people have been set apart from this substance, why would any of us give ourselves over to that? Would be, I think that is a stretch. That wouldn't be my favorite argument for it. But if some are set apart, why not all of us?
If that's like the moral, like absolute though, then Jesus would be basically like condemning these people by giving them alcohol.
Right.
Where it'd be saying like, I don't want these people in heaven anyways. They're too rowdy, so we'll just get them all hopped up on some.
The story you start on in here is an interesting story, I think, because it might be a stretch if this is a week-long party and we're on day 3 and have run out. I think you can probably refute this, but I could say that, well, on day 4 they wake up and they're not hammered, and Jesus has provided wine for the rest of the week in abundance, and it is on them what they do with it. it certainly seems like he would know that they have drank it in excess so much that they drank it all already.
Right.
It doesn't seem like a wise decision to give it to them. And it's on them if they drink it in drunkenness. But if we're trying to last this over 4 days and he's given them good wine to enjoy, do you not agree with some of the stuff that it's not as strong as our drink today? Some of that stuff that it's not the same.
I don't. There's like the verses about like making it a merry heart, and then the fact that there's multiple verses about not being a drunkard.
Yeah.
And then it would lead me to believe that no, I think it's just maybe it's not as well. Number one, wine is, comparatively speaking, on average, 10 to 13% alcohol. Very low alcohol content, where it's double what a beer is. So wine to begin with is not a strong alcohol content, but like especially like in this case, we're talking about let's say it was Miller Lite. Like a 3% alcohol, or Oklahoma's 3%, or 6% alcohol, like a low alcohol drink that is made, and they're making gallons, like depending which verse, it's like 50 to 80 gallons in 6 jars. The jars were anywhere from, they're multiple gallons. We're talking about giant quantities of alcohol that they've already moved through. So even if it is a super low, you can get drunk off drinking 8 beers. And so even if it's if the quantity of alcohol is lower, we still know that it's not non-alcoholic. And because it's the same word that's used, like when they're describing wine, there's not an O'Doul's. There's not an O'Doul's Hebrew word that like, well, this was the non-alcoholic wine. Like that they just drank thousands and thousands or hundreds of gallons of this week. These people just love their orange juice. No, they're drinking in a celebratory manner. So I would say that you would really have to be far-fetched to argue that like, no, this isn't non-alcoholic wine, because the word from the authors, I mean, maybe I guess if the authors got the words mixed up, maybe it was supposed to be like cream soda, and they're like, I can't think of a word for that. Let's just put wine. It could be something like that. But no, it doesn't. I don't think there's any evidence to say that it was a non-alcoholic wine. And the main thing I have is, I think there's enough verses where we can agree that wine or alcohol can be enjoyed in like small. The warrants that Jesus is drinking, they drink wine at dinner, and they drink wine, and certainly like 1 glass of wine or 2 glasses of wine is not going to impair somebody. I don't think Jesus. I guess my question would be, like, if Jesus got drunk one time with the apostles at the Last Supper, would that have been a sin? And I don't think my thought would be, I don't think it would be. I think it'd be a sin if he was. I think the sin comes after being drunk with wine. I think if Jesus gets hammered at the Last Supper, that's not a sin. But if he smarts off and hurts somebody's feelings, like, wow, Martha, you're looking fat today. Or he lusts because he's got lust in his heart, because he's drunk and not in full, his capacities are not all there. It puts him in a position to commit a sin. But that would be my argument, is that is it the wisest? I would agree with you that no, it's probably not. It's not wise to drink alcohol. It's also not wise to drink anything that could have negative effects, like hamburgers, sugar. Sure. Alcohol has more instantaneous potential consequences, where if you're drunk, you can go to jail, you can say something that you regret, you can hurt somebody, you can wreck a car. So there's a lot more instantaneous things that can happen with alcohol, but also with a hamburger. If you eat hamburgers every day, there's not instantaneous effects, but you might die 30 years early of a heart attack. And I'd say that's more of a sin than someone who drinks a lot, or someone who gets drunk, but they're not necessarily sinning or committing a sin.
Yeah.
So I would agree that is it the wisest thing to do? No, but there's a lot of not wise things to do. The wisest thing for us to be doing right now would be doing push-ups and exercising and making sure we don't eat any sugar and drinking a gallon of water today.
Yep.
So we get into what's the wisest, what's best, should we do it? Should we get behind the wheel of a car? I don't know, because we're risking 50,000 deaths in the United States every year from people who drive. So we could definitely help our chances an extra 1% if we weren't driving. So I guess that would be where I'd go or I would like to know.
It's okay, but not wise.
It's okay, but it's not wise. And I think that's what makes it okay for Jesus. I think that's what makes it not a sin for him to give people a bunch of alcohol at a party when it's like, what are you doing? Those people could sin, but that's not up to Jesus.
Sure.
It's still, if they drink too much, if they're drunk and they sin, that's them sinning, and you could call it enabling, but we have some free will, I think.
Yep.
But I think that's how he gets away with it. Because if otherwise it'd be him, if drinking or getting drunk was a sin, then I would say it's kind of like him handing a pistol to someone who commits a murder. Whereas he's giving them something that they don't necessarily have to sin on. It might not be wise for him. It might not be wise for him to get drunk. Who knows what happened at that party? There could have been tons of sins committed.
Totally. Sure.
But that was still their decision. It was their decision if they drank too much. And it was their decision to commit a sin and put themselves in a position where they were able to commit a sin, I guess.
Yeah.
But I think it would be controversial to Jesus's character if drunkenness. I'd say to drunkenness. That's why the Hebrew word is like an addict and someone given to wine. It's the same as the way that they describe it in Hebrew. It's the same as idolatry, where it's someone who's serving another master. And so I think there's a disparaging. It's like someone who's an addict or drinks all the time, or someone who's given to it. I think they would use the same word if they even had carbs back then. If they had hamburgers back then that were killing people. Yeah. That was the largest killer in the United States is heart disease. And so if that was a problem in Israel in the time, I think it would have mentioned it in here and hey, if you're going to eat hamburgers, be careful about this. Don't do it in excess.
Yes. Yeah. Should be gluttony. But
yeah.
So I think it's interesting to go back to your question about if Jesus had gotten hammered at the Last Supper, would he have sinned? Is drunkenness a sin? So my foundational verse for where I sit on this whole topic is in Ephesians 5, when Paul says, "Do not be caught up in drunkenness, instead be filled by the Spirit." And when I read that, I have two options to direct my life. And so being a believer, following Christ involves being Spirit filled. As I trust in Christ, his promise to the disciples was he was going to send his Spirit to fill me and lead me and guide me. And it's a daily battle. Throughout Galatians 5, it talks about I wake up and I can either choose to surrender to the flesh or I can choose to surrender to the Spirit inside of me. And it's this daily, do I want to do the fruit of this flesh, which drunkenness is included in there, or do I want to walk in the fruits of the Spirit, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, who's going to control me today? And when it says here, and it draws direct contrast to do not be drunk, do not be caught up in drunkenness, whichever translation you read, instead be filled by the Spirit, then when I choose drunkenness, I relinquish or forfeit the control of the Spirit. So to me, that's not if I go home and beat my wife or go home and drive a car or I lust after someone. It's not the sin that comes after. It's the forfeiture of who's controlling my life that happens in drunkenness. So for me, I do think, it's hilarious that we're saying this, I do think that if Jesus got hammered at the Last Supper, he would have stepped into saying, I'm no longer going to be filled with the Spirit, Trinity, whatever that meant, of him being, he was fully God. He would forfeit the control and direction of the Spirit in his life. And as a believer, I would also do the same thing. And so whether I go and sin or not, I've said, I want my flesh or some other substance to control and direct my life other than the Spirit. To me, that's a sin. That's stepping into I haven't done an outward sin, but this is commanding me not to do that. But I'm allowing a substance to control me.
That's Paul.
This is Paul.
So,
is Paul trumping Jesus?
Are
you throwing Paul out? You want to get ready to throw Paul out?
I'm not throwing Paul out, but what verse is that in? Is that
Ephesians 5:18?
Never heard of it, because he wrote another book after that was way better.
Okay.
Well, I think
which of books are better?
One thing with another verse that would go along with your argument is in Corinthians, where Paul says, like, all things are lawful to me, but not all things are helpful.
Sure.
And so I can see that, but you also have to take Paul's letters with a grain of salt, because he also tells women that they can't go out in public without a hair covering, and like one of his deals, and like, well, if they're not eating meat, then you can't eat meat. You shouldn't eat meat in one chapter, but in another one he says, like, well, he is writing specific letters to specific, and he's writing good advice. And so I'm not arguing with the fact, is it great advice?
Sure. Yeah.
But is it a law that, like I say, like, would it be a sin for Jesus based on the scriptures for him to drink if he didn't commit a sin? If he just got hammered and went to sleep?
Yeah.
And I know we're getting technical.
Sure. And so what can sometimes seem on this topic, because where the rubber hits the road is this idea, you keep using the word, means addict, right? Like, we live in a culture where I think if Paul's talking to the Spirit and being either, I have a choice, and what he's seeming to say here is, I'm either controlled and led by the Spirit and filled by the Spirit, which Jesus intended me to do or be, or I'm not, and I've given myself over to flesh and, in this case, another substance. I don't think there's other situations where, but in that case, if you get drunk in that situation, that's no big deal, because you haven't forfeited the Spirit. It seems like it's either I'm following the leading of the Spirit, or I'm choosing flesh or another substance. And to me, as a believer, I have enough trouble following the leading of the Spirit daily to not throw a substance in on top of that Paul is very clear that I'm forfeiting the direction of the Spirit in my life. And I agree with you. Yeah, we should be doing push-ups, and we shouldn't be hammering sugar. I hammer a lot of sugar. I shouldn't be eating hamburgers in excess. Why wouldn't we want the best that God's called in us in life? And why wouldn't I want moment by moment to be led by the Spirit? Which then goes, why even touch this stuff that if I do drink it in excess leads to the forfeiture of the Spirit's control in my life, which God intended me to have, which Jesus died for me to be able to have, this restored perfect relationship with God. That, to me, alcohol carries that weight. And that's why I would ask the question, I think there are places to drink, and I do think there are places to be aware of that. But man, we need to know why when we're going in. I think we're very flippant with it, where we go to the bar and we have 5 drinks and then the 6th, and all of a sudden we are hammered. And practically playing out, normally that leads to sin, or normally that leads to not the decisions that the Spirit would want me to make in my life. More often than not, there are seldom situations where drunkenness leads to what the Spirit would want in my life. And I would say often in our culture, we drink for the purpose of getting to that place. There are a few people who have, that's not fair. That's a way overgeneralization. There are some who have a drink here or there. I was going to go a different direction, but I'll let you jump in on that.
Well, I'm using Jesus's situation as my platform for that, because I agree with you on the. I don't think it's wise to, number one, there's better options, and I do think I think there's many times that I have drank. I've drank to excess and not sin, like had a great time and nothing happened. On the other hand, there's been lots of times that I've definitely sinned, but I probably would have sinned anyways.
So is that justifying? May as well be hammered to.
I don't know if I can put all the blame on alcohol for.
Fair.
I don't think it should take the full blunt of the like a cop out, which a lot of people use it as a cop out as well, which makes it great. Like, oh, I drank too much. Sorry.
Yeah. That wasn't me.
Not my fault.
Yeah.
Blame it on the alcohol. There was a song about it.
And so again, it's like there's a song about a lot of stuff. But so for me, it's like as a believer, what am I called to? And I think this is where we get the separation of like Samson had this Nazirite vow and he was a special calling of God. And the rest of us are just kind of dwelling on earth. Yeah, we believe in God, but we're just kind of going about it. Or do we truly believe that each of us are masterpieces for a purpose, for the actual work that God's called us to? And if that's the case, and you have a specific purpose and I have a specific purpose, are there ever moments where I want to be led by a substance or my flesh, or do I always want to be spirit led? I fail at this as much as anybody in other areas, where I choose my flesh to lead me in certain situations rather than the flesh or than the spirit. But I want to get to a place where I am spirit led in everything that I do. And if one of the deterrents of that is this substance that can lead to drunkenness, that would be the substitution of the Spirit's leading in my life, then I want to try and remove that. Not legalistically, never can touch it. I'm not there.
But so you can operate on your best. So that's which I can even I got a friend who's in town right now who's filming a movie,
cool.
And he's not drinking for health reasons because he's working out, wants to be in shape, and so he doesn't have any idealistic views about alcohol other than it's not healthy for him, his body, or he's on a better performance right now as he's worked. A lot of guys don't drink going into training camps for fighting and stuff like that. So it is treated in a secular view the very same way, like, well, it's not good, so I'm going to sacrifice this for this time period while I'm trying to be the best person I can be. So I could concede that is probably something we should take just as serious in our Christian. Those are for physical reasons, but
we should have the same passion.
Should have the same mentality.
Hamburgers. What you said, why not in every area?
Right. That's why I said alcohol gets a worse rap because nobody's ever got hopped up on hamburgers and killed their wife.
Right. Right.
So alcohol gets a little bit worse.
I'm curious if anybody ever has. You should research that.
So alcohol gets a worse rap because there's some astronomical percentages of sexual molestations and rapes and things that have happened, and it's 75% of the time when it happens, alcohol is involved with. So there's definitely major connotations, but as far as sin's concerned, it's all the sins that's just as bad as drinking a hamburger as far as not making it into heaven.
Right.
But
so let's take it to the direction of my brother, some of the other stuff that I've thought about when I drink alcohol and knowing why I'm drinking what I'm drinking when I drink it. And I don't know if this is a correct application of Romans 14, but you even referenced it. If you're with somebody and they don't eat meat offered to idols, then you, to the weaker brother, in this case, I'd be the weaker brother, but in your freedom, don't let your freedom cause another brother to stumble, and be aware of how other people view this. So in light of this substance, I lived in the hockey culture for a long time. And so for one, what I did with alcohol was very visible and a very tangible, either conversation starter or, it showed either my faith or not my faith. And so I had to be very intentional about what I did with this substance, in that culture. But also then when we think about the level of addiction in this nation alone, and drugs and substances, I've got some numbers here. I don't even know how accurate they are, but the addiction world is crazy. And so why would I touch a substance that I know some brothers might lead them down a road to potentially lose their families and fall off I've got to be very careful about who's watching me who sees my freedom and is impacted by my freedom with alcohol, and then they can't handle it and it runs down. Am I responsible for that? Ultimately, it's their decision. But man, I want my life to edify and encourage them, not to be something that could be a stumbling block for them. And I don't want my freedom to be overarching their struggle. And then when you take it to the unbelieving world, which is the majority of the hockey culture, my not drinking with them, again, was a sign. It made them think, okay, here's a hockey guy. I tried to be the best teammate I could be. And yet, as he's this teammate that I think some of them at least appreciate me as a teammate, but he doesn't do that. Well, let's look at his life, and hopefully they could see in my life a following of Christ, certainly not perfect, but now there's a chance to have a conversation on alcohol, and alcohol becomes potentially this inroad because I choose not to have a dialogue with them. And there's actually moments where I have drank intentionally in that environment because I had set the foundation for 4 months of not drinking, to then kind of rock the world because I didn't believe it was legalistic. It's not just don't drink, shame on you, bad. It was now their world's rocked because they think it's that. And now they see me drink and it opens a door to go, hold on a second. What? I thought this was just no alcohol, the typical Christian, you can't drink. And now it's something different. And it furthers the conversation towards Christ and spirit-filled living, not just don't list of rules and commandments that Christ didn't call us to.
I would, one of the things I find interesting is that it's Paul who's writing out most of the things about how behavior and not causing people to stumble and this and this. And it seems almost contradictory to how Jesus was living his life, just from the very fact of his acquaintances, the tax collectors, the prostitutes, wine at a party, like bringing alcohol to a party. And so it is interesting, the correlation, because the apostles are basing their preaching, and obviously they all get killed for their belief, and they're basing their preachings off the guy they've been hanging out with the whole time. And Jesus, of course, I guess I don't know if he's got more leeway because he's the creator of the universe. but it is interesting that like he seems to be more blasé about, I don't know if that's the right word, about
laissez-faire.
Laissez-faire.
But you can add a B to it.
Blasé flips his hand. But he doesn't seem to be. He's obviously not worried about that when he's showing up for wine, like making wine for a party or hanging out with the prostitutes. And people were always like, "What's he doing with those? Like, what's he doing with those people? What's he doing with the tax collector?"
Yeah.
What if Jesus is with the woman at the well and people see him and they're like, holy cow, if Jesus can hang out with prostitutes, I'm going to go to the brothel.
Yeah.
Like, don't worry, honey. It's fine. I saw Jesus out by the well with a woman, and she's a huge whore, so it's fine.
Right.
Jesus was doing it earlier. And the drunk guy, he's like, well, gets hammered at the wedding party, and he's like, it's fine. Jesus made it.
Yeah. Right. I mean, that's a great, and it would seem to argue what Paul's saying.
Jesus is the least legalistic, it seems. In fact, he's super removed from whenever the Pharisees trying to pin him as far as working on the Sabbath. They all follow the law, the Mosaic law. And I guess, way more closely. And I think maybe part of that is Jesus is coming from a place of, I'm in heaven and I'm way smarter than you guys down here, and they're coming from thousands of years of generations of the law being embedded into them. So you can't really help it coming out stronger because they're having to remove themselves from these structured beliefs that they've been, especially Saul, and correlate it to Jesus. But you can't help that the elements of their beliefs would still be stuck in there, how they raise and how their whole culture revolves. But I think that's an interesting thing that there seems to be. Well, and it's same with the church today. The different denominations of the church have way stricter guidelines than the apostles did or than Jesus did. There's dress codes, and you might have to physically have water splashed on you to get into heaven in one denomination. You might have to speak in tongues to get into heaven in another denomination. You might have to pet a snake to get into heaven in another. There's weird stuff with all under the same umbrella, so everyone kind of takes their different little spin off of it, and then Jesus is just back here like, I wonder if Jesus would have been allowed in some of the churches today.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great. What I would love to do is go to those when he's hanging out. We get to hear a little bit of him talking to the adulteress in John 8, and we get to kind of see the product of him inviting Matthew, the tax collector, and then Matthew throws a party, or it seems he throws a party because it's full of drunkards and gluttons, such that the Pharisees call them scum. And why is Jesus hanging out with those scum?
And the wee little man.
It's like, So
hanging out with midgets.
I would love to hear Jesus' conversation in those moments. I would love to hear what the the banter that would have gone on at that party where Matthew's got all his buddies, and the Pharisees won't even enter because they're like, how dare, what's Jesus?
We know he doesn't sin, obviously. And then like the conversations we do have with like the woman at the well, like you could say that is super controversial. Just even to be talking to a random woman who you know that everyone knows has like the town prostitute, the town slut, I guess you could say, terrible word. But, everyone knows it, and he's talking to her out in public. We know what he's saying to her. He's telling her, like, go and sin no more. But you know, people are like, what is he doing over there? Like, oh, man, this is...
But we can also see the product in those conversations, right? We can see Matthew follow him as a disciple. We can see the adulterous woman in John 8. All the religious people are basically slapped in the face by him as he sends them away. Only you who have not sinned can throw the first stone.
Right.
And so they walk away with potentially a changed perspective, and she walks away not condemned by him, but encouraged not to sin. And so, yes, he can't control who's looking in from the outside, but the product of the people in his relationships are impacted in a profound way. The woman at the well in John 4 is incredible. She becomes like maybe the first evangelist or missionary. She goes back to her town, and in spite of her 5 marriages or whatever she was on, the townspeople come to faith in this guy, or at least come to see him. Some believe and some have to actually meet him to believe, but there's this movement in her town where she is definitely impacted by him, and it seems like it multiplies into her town because of his conversation. So Jesus at least carries the I would agree. Maybe he's not as cautious about the people onlooking from the outside, even his disciples who aren't sure what he's doing with that woman. But in his relationships here, it's always for the benefit and the furthering of his mission, and people hurt his heart. And so I think he's in line with Paul's teaching on, don't cause your brother to stumble. Whenever he had conversations, I would assume the same in Matthew's party, with the scum that the Pharisees think they are. I would imagine those guys walk away changed, and he's hanging out with them. And the Pharisees see him hanging out with drunkards and gluttons so much that they call him one falsely. But those guys that are hanging out on the inside are probably changed, going, this guy is the...
Yeah, but it seems like he's not worried about causing his brother. He's worried about the relationship and helping the woman at the well, helping Zacchaeus, he's worried about these individuals, and he doesn't care what other people, he doesn't care. He's helping the party people, and maybe it's like he's helping his mom and he's like, well, this isn't a sin, I'm helping these people out.
Yeah.
He's worried about like getting the job done, and I think there's a fine line of, that's where the legalism comes in. If you're too worried about causing your brother to stumble, then you end up, if that becomes more important than the relationship, or that's where your religion starts evolving, and that's why a lot of people hate religion, because it's like starts with these little things, and then you have a church that looks nothing like Jesus' life, where it's like, why would people not feel welcome to go to your church, but they felt comfortable talking to Jesus? And so I think there's a balance there.
Totally.
But it does seem to me like Jesus is not worried about. Paul makes a big deal. They make a big deal about like not causing your brother to stumble. But when Jesus turned the water into wine, he's not talking about that. Or when he's getting huge backlash for hanging out with Matthew and Zacchaeus, from, you could say like, well, man, like how many of those people like saw that and didn't want to hear anything he had to say? And maybe the Pharisees didn't want to hear what he had to say because he's hanging out with a tax collector, and he got maybe Matthew, saved Matthew, but other people, he caused them to turn away from the gospel because just like you're saying, if you see a Christian having a beer and they're like, well, this guy's drinks, so I can't believe anything he says. Then I don't want anything to do with Christianity because this, But it seems like Jesus throws all that away, and he's worried about himself not sinning, I guess. And
reaching people
relationally, and the long-term product obviously comes out. And so instead of trying to protect like this little circle, instead of protecting like the hundreds of people that are watching him hang out with Matthew the tax collector, he's going Matthew the tax collector, and then making him Matthew becomes an apostle and writes a book that's one of the New York Times best-selling authors for years and years and years. So
forever.
So he's looking at an eternal perspective, and maybe that's why he doesn't care, because he knows everything I'm doing is going to have a long-term benefit. And I think that's important too, is like, how are we, or how are we perceiving, like, yes, we could cause somebody to stumble. One of the other things, like, I wanted to talk about this, like, is it a sin? I think it also becomes something where if you're drinking and having a good time and nobody cares and you don't sin, it's not a sin. If I'm drinking and have a good time and I don't sin either, but my wife is pissed off at me, then I could be sinning by doing the exact same thing because of who it's affecting in my life, causing her bitterness or whatever. I could be causing a sin, even if I'm not personally sinning. If I'm breaching my relationship by doing something or putting something over her, then I'm sinning in that way. Or like I said, putting something over God. He commands us to love our wives, doing it that way. So I think the wise is, yes, it's not wise to do, but I don't think it's inherently a sin. And
drinking or drunkenness. Because I think what we do take from, we look at John 2 and we take, okay, hard to understand story of Jesus producing this wine, different understandings or interpretations of that, or him hanging out with drunkards or gluttons and not seeming to worry too much about the crowd that's watching him on the outside. He's worried about those relationships. But what we do is we end up going, okay, because of that, I have license and freedom to go to the bar and drink and party. And we project out our freedom, whether it's just drinking or drunkenness, because what we want is a selfish desire for this substance that produces in us a feeling or creates an environment that's more fun. And really, we can be very selfishly motivated in our desire to drink. And we use this story about Jesus that's sometimes hard to understand, or any other moments or situations, to justify our actions that we want. I want to be drunk, or I want to at least be able to drink and still party. And Jesus' motive was never that. His motive was always, I want to reach the adulterous woman. I want the woman at the well to know that I love her and care for her and died for her. I want Matthew and his buddies, and I want the Pharisees on the outside to see that I came for the sick, not for those who think they're healthy. And Jesus' motive was always for the lost and for people to know Christ and follow. We take what he's taught and make it our license to get as close to sin as we can, maybe, but maybe not. And
I would say that it comes from where the heart's at, and why are you wanting to get drunk?
Why so that, you
like,
drink?
I don't think the actual sin is the drunkenness. I think the sin is what you're drinking to accomplish, which I think that there is a mission I think he's saying it's okay in this instance, the celebratory instance, at this wedding, for them to drink. Once again, I'll say I don't think it's wise. I don't think it's the best thing that we can do with our lives for health reasons and for other reasons. But it seems like he's given them a license, but it becomes a sin. It becomes a sin after. It becomes a sin based on the heart, just like anything else in the Bible. And that's kind of his big deal, that's why he doesn't get caught up in a lot of that stuff, I think, because it all comes to the heart. And so when he's giving those people wine, he knows that they're going to drink it, but it's down to their heart to make a decision. There's a bunch of instances in the Old Testament, Deuteronomy, where they talk about, go get your strong drink, and the men will have their strong drink, and buy your wine and this and that, and grow your vineyards and drink your aged wine. So there's like a lot of.
I have to read those in context.
We'll have to wrap it. I know you got to go, but we can come back and talk about this. But that would be my argument would be like, man, it seems like if it was, getting drunk was a sin, that Jesus wouldn't be seemingly allowing it, and then it wouldn't be mentioned in so many passing deals as like part of what is acceptable. And I know that you got to take a lot of things with a grain of salt, just like I said about in Romans and Corinthians and Ephesians. He is writing specifically to the church, and he writes specific stuff to different congregations and different cultures and towns that can go differentiate.
And the list of that is included, drunkenness is included in, is not like, you can't go, witchcraft is okay at some points. And I mean, when you walk through the list of sin that drunkenness is listed in there, I think it'd be a hard argument to say that drunkenness is okay. To dabble from the conversation of can we drink to is drunkenness okay? That's a whole nother argument for me. I think it's real clear that drunkenness is sinful and what it comes with it, and the forfeiture of the spirit inside of me is.
I think that the word
very sinful.
I think the word that they're using though is not about a specific instance. I think it's a lifestyle that they're talking about. I think they're using like witchcraft. Like you're involved. Witchcraft's not something that you just do one time. Drunkenness is. It's this lifestyle is not, and it's because of idolatry. Just like witchcraft is idolatry. It's putting when something's more important than Jesus is what I believe that they're trying to say. What was that, Corinthians 2 or Romans?
Well, where I was looking at is so sexual immorality, that could be a moment. Obviously, it could also be a lifestyle. Impurity could be a moment. Depravity, idolatry, moment or otherwise, right? Sorcery, hostility, strife, jealousy, outbursts of anger, selfish rivalries, dissensions, factions, envying, moment or lifestyle, murder, moment or lifestyle, drunkenness. I just think
carousing.
It'd be
is that the Canadian version?
Orgies. Momentary orgy or a lifestyle orgy. So I just think that it's a massive step to then say that drunkenness in a moment or an occasional drunkenness, as long as it's not a lifestyle of addiction. And we can talk about this another time. We can buy out more time. We can redo this whole conversation if you want. But I don't sit in the case of going occasional drunkenness is permitted. The John 2 story is a hard one for me to understand why Jesus did what he did. And I don't claim to understand that completely, but I look at the entirety of the Bible and Jesus' approach. I think he loved to be with partiers. I think he loved to love on partiers. He loved to rock the world of the religious elite who thought, oh, how dare you even be around those type of people? And Jesus went right in there. But you brought up the great one. If you're saying this is not wise and I'm choosing to do it, I mean, that's a dangerous place to live, I would think. And then the second piece for me is, why do I drink? Am I intentional about my thinking, or am I just taking what Jesus has said and justifying what I want to do with this substance?
Okay, we'll have to, but doing things that aren't wise, it wasn't wise for Jesus to go from town to town with a bunch of people that wanted to kill him. That wasn't wise either. So not doing something just because it's not wise.
Well, wise by worldly standards or wise by what God says wisdom is?
I'd say
it's an interesting, which word use of the word wise are you using?
I'm using wise versus.
I would say it was very wise for Jesus to hang out with. Based on the purpose that God had for him? He was hanging out with the very people he needed. To say that something Jesus did wasn't wise. In human eyes, maybe, but God's wisdom.
Yeah, based on, I guess, saving souls.
He's probably living at the heart of God's wisdom.
It wasn't wise for him to buy alcohol or make alcohol for all
that
those people
is a great question.
With his magic trick. So, anyways.
Yeah, I like it.
We'll continue this conversation. Yeah. Thanks for watching. God bless.